Hello, welcome to 8.9 News. I'm ffinlo Costain. Peter Powell, Chief Executive of the Dee River Trust, recently drew attention to slurry pollution incidents in North Wales, each of which he says would have been devastating to the wildlife living in the rivers. Peter joined me for a conversation, and I started by asking him just how much of a problem slurry pollution really is.
Slurry this year in particular has become a really severe pollution problem for rivers, particularly here in Wales, where we have a lot of rainfall. In the last couple of weeks, there's been three quite serious slurry pollution incidents in Wales that have been pretty devastating for the river. And it is one of the more severe pollutants that is finding itself into watercourses. One of the big issues of slurry is that it's actually much more toxic than a lot of other things, say sewage, which is also finding its way, thousands of litres of sewage are finding their way into rivers, but that's actually quite made up mostly of sort of tap water and drinking water, whereas slurry is really quite concentrated animal excreta. And because it's so concentrated, that means a litre of it is much more toxic when it finds its way into the river. So that's quite a severe problem, really, when that happens.
Now, farmers might reasonably assume that rainwater will dilute the slurry before it hits watercourses in just the same way that the sewage system dilutes human waste. Is there a diluting effect?
Yeah, I mean, there is almost definitely a diluting effect. The more rainfall mixed in with the slurry, the more it's diluted. But there's a couple of different pathways that slurry is making its way into watercourses. There's the spreading and the overland flows and the rainfall diluting it that way. Also, one of the other ones that we find quite a severe one is slurry making its way into clean water drains within the farmyards. So that's almost pure slurry then, not diluted at all, getting into a clean water drain, going through the drain and into the river that way. Those slurry pollution incidents I was talking about, they were more where issues had appeared in the farmyard, and slurry had escaped the farmyard rather than the other pathway, which is spreading across fields.
When you say that there were serious incidents, how do you define serious?
I mean, a really serious incident is when you have a fish kill, and you have dead fish appearing within a river. But I think any level of slurry pollution within a river is going to be causing some damage to invertebrates or to the wildlife, and make it a much more difficult environment and upset the river ecosystem. So even small levels will affect it, but more serious ones where you're getting a fish kill or the river is discolored, smells of slurry, looks more like slurry than it does a clean water, really.
Now, the weather this winter has been so awful that it can't be a surprise that slurry tanks are overflowing. Other than spread, what can farmers do right now?
I mean, this it's coming to a head at the moment because we have had such a long period of wet weather that even the best systems with all the correct infrastructure in place are really starting to be stretched and suffer. It needs, we need to be investing in storage so that we can store it for as long as possible. But it is a really challenging year, and I think that's why we're seeing quite so many slurry incidents at the moment.
But in terms of dealing with it at this stage, if farmers are in the situation where their slurry tanks are overflowing, is it not better to spread the muck over a wider field area than to just allow it to leach in a more concentrated form from the farmyard?
Yes, and I mean the best thing would be to get out, spread it on fields. Try and get. It doesn't feel like we've had any windows of nice weather, but if there's one short afternoon of nice weather, and get it out and get it spread rather than letting the slurry overflow or get into a clean water drain, that would be the best in an emergency situation. It may be worth talking to NRW or the Environment Agency or another government organisation if you really are up against it, and pre-warning them that you're taking what would be essentially be emergency measures to avoid a slurry lagoon failure. But really, we should be investing in the infrastructure and the storage so that we're not finding ourselves in these situations.
Well, looking to the future and the likelihood of more long, wet winters as a result of climate change, what are the solutions?
I mean, there's a few. One is investing in farmyard infrastructure, and to do that, farms need to be able to get paid enough money for the produce they're producing so that they can invest in the future. So that's better, better clean water, dirty water separation, slightly larger slurry lagoons, better organized yards so that the slurry is easier to manage. But I think also, if we are going to continue to have really, really unpredictable and very wet weather like we're having, we should be taking steps to try and reduce the amount of time that cattle are spending indoors, try and get them outdoors more. That means, looking at changing grazing practices, trying to improve soil health as much as possible so that the fields are then more resilient to this wet weather. You can keep the livestock out for longer. They're not, if they're not in the farmyards, they're not producing as much slurry. You don't need as much storage, and that sort of makes the whole system slightly easier to manage during extreme weather. Obviously, this year we've had so much rain. There's a limit to how much you can do, but I think we should be really taking steps to try and improve the water holding capability of the land and making our farms more resilient to wet weather and extreme weather.
Now, Peter, you're based in Wales and the Sustainable Farming Scheme has yet to come in. And of course, that's going to prioritise soil health and more nature-based solutions. But are there currently grants available for upgrading slurry infrastructure?
There's been a few from Welsh Government, but I think it's everyone that's came out has been massively oversubscribed, and there's a real need for support out there to help farmyards, help farms improve their farmyards, improve their slurry infrastructure. I think it needs to be coming from Welsh Government. I think it needs to be coming from milk buyers. But I think ultimately the whole food system needs to be set up so that farms, are making enough money from the produce they're selling to be able to invest in the business. But I think we're now in a situation where so much investment is needed that somewhat governments or milk supermarkets, milk buyers need to step in to help upgrade due to the severe lack of investment over the last sort of decade or 2 decades or so on a lot of farms.
Now, you've got a webinar coming up on Thursday, the 11th of April, which is focused particularly on phosphorus pollution. What are you going to be covering?
So phosphorus is one of the sort of nutrients that you find in slurry, but also in sewage, and it's having quite a big impact on the River Dee. The River Dee is a special area of conservation, and so because of that, it's got targets for all sorts of nutrients and pollutants, including phosphorus, and it's failing. Currently, in some of its water bodies are failing for phosphorus targets. This is having quite a big impact on development, and quite a lot of local development has stopped. Can't get planning permission because of the phosphorus levels. So in that webinar, I'm going to sort of talk about all the various different pathways that phosphorus is making its way into the river, and the work that Welsh Dee Trust is doing to sort of disconnect some of those pathways, try and reduce the amount of phosphorus, and then look to the future about how we can, ultimately reduce the phosphorus in the river, unlock developments, and help improve the river ecosystem and bring it back within the targets of the special area of conservation.
That was Peter Powell from the Dee River Trust. More information about that webinar and other information on their website at welshdeetrust.com. More news as ever on our website, 8point9.com. That's all for now. We're back soon. Thanks for watching.